Historians of United States history, welcome to Chapter 17, the Roaring Twenties and the Jazz Age. Now, I don't think this is going to take that long, so let's get right to it. Break out those class notes, the ones that say Chapter 17 on the top of them. There's going to be one or two slides that might jump out, seem a little bit out of order, but don't worry, I'll get us there. I'll explain it. First thing off will be Henry Ford's assembly line. Now, you see Fords on the road today, sometimes called found on road dead or fast on race day, depending upon your NASCAR preferences. But Ford is a big time auto company now, and it was a big time auto company at the beginning of the 20th century. And it all starts with the owner, Henry Ford. And it's not just because he made good cars, he made very good cars. He made the Model T. Uh, but it's the method that he used to make those cars, the assembly line. What's the assembly line? Well, it's many times it is a long line where a piece goes through a piece of the car and the operations are divided to be very, very simple. So a person might only turn the wrench a quarter of the way and then give it to the next guy, and then the next part comes, turn the inch a quarter of the way and pass it down. The reason this is a good thing for Henry Ford and for Ford Motors is because, and for the people, if they did it in this way, they had a simple way of doing things that created cars very, very identical to each other, and it made the goods affordable for the American people. Okay, 1914, a Model T cost $850, which doesn't sound like a lot now, but that was a lot then. By 1924, the Model T cost $295. So the assembly line is making things cheaper, right? Cars are totally going to take off at this time. Starting in the 20s and going on throughout the 20th century, owning a car is going to be part of the American dream, and we can thank Henry Ford and the assembly line for that, okay? How about consumer goods? Well, there's lots of other things that were becoming more popular as well, and they were making especially what you would call housework much more simple. Okay, you can see this is a very primitive refrigerator. This is a primitive washing machine, and this is the most primitive vacuum cleaner that you probably have ever seen before. Consumer goods are a huge part of the 1920s economy. People are excited. The economy's good. There's all these great products to buy. One little preview I'll say is that many people are buying these goods on credit. There's low interest rates at the time. It's easy to get money. People are taking money and buying a vacuum cleaner, a washing machine, a refrigerator. And for now, it seems okay. Hey, we can pay them off later, right? That will be a little bit of a problem in Chapter 18, but we're not there yet. Another big invention, if the cars are very, very important, then so is the invention of the airplane. Now, it's hard to say invention because people had things that looked like airplanes. There's only one problem. To truly be an airplane, you've got to fly. And the Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur Wright, are the first to fly in 1903 at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Their aircraft takes off, has sustained flight. Now, interesting, it was in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, which is why you see the license plates for North Carolina that say first in flight. But the Wright brothers themselves are actually from Ohio. Why do they go to North Carolina? Because they want to go to the beach, dude. It's windy at the beach, and that wind made it easier for their plane to fly. Now, that happens at the very beginning of the 20th century, 1903. By the 20s, there are airline industries. You can fly from one area of the country to another on a plane, right? You would think of doing that today. In the 1920s, some people might be afraid of the technology then, but man, think about from 1903, they got something going on the beach. By the 20s, airlines are taking off. Charles Lindbergh becomes a hero of the United States for flying from the East Coast to Europe and over the Atlantic Ocean flight. That was in 1927. So airplanes, Wright brothers, got it, good. How about the mass media? Man, there's like three big types of mass media then, and some people say that those are still very viable today. What are they? Radio, movies, newspapers, and magazines. What you listen, what you see, and what you read. Let's start with radio. Radio broadcasts sports. At this time, the New York Yankees were the dominant team of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball was one of the biggest sports, along with boxing and horse racing. Okay, so people are listening to sports. They're also listening to jazz music. Later, during FDR's presidency, they're going to listen to his fireside chats. But radio is very important. Most people own a radio. Okay, like radio then is the TV of now. People listen to the news on the radio, the weather on the radio, comedy programs on the radio. Okay, got lots of their terms from the radio. Now, movies are going to be very important too. One movie is the one you can see right here below, D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. That's actually going to spark the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan, but we'll talk about those guys in a second. Big thing about media is during the 1930s, people are going to go to the movies to escape the Depression realities, right? So they're going to movies for an escapism, something that a lot of people do today. And the printed word. What about newspapers? What about magazines? Lots of cultural norms and cultural fads came out of these newspapers, and that's the big idea of mass media. Understand, mass media and communications shape popular culture, and they challenge traditional values. Many people think that is true today. As far as shaping popular culture, there are some terms such as "you are gaga" or "you are full of baloney." Those are mass media ideas from the 1920s, and today, because our society has progressed so much, it is GTL. All right, now, that's kind of the happy things are great. We got planes, we got cars, we've got consumer goods. Now let's talk about nativism resurging. You are looking at Mr. Sacco and Mr. Vanzetti. In 1920, they were Italian immigrants in Massachusetts. They were charged with murder. At their court case, very questionable evidence was presented. So many people thought, I don't know if it's likely they were actually guilty of the murder. The judge in the case was very, very prejudiced, especially towards immigrants, especially towards Italian immigrants. At the court case, he made openly bigoted statements. So everybody's saying, oh, then they get convicted of murder, sentenced to death. But everybody's saying, hey, we should have another trial, right? This wasn't a fair trial for these people. They never got the fair trial, and they were sentenced to death later. The point of the Sacco-Vanzetti trial is it shows that this was a controversial case, and it highlights the prejudice and fears of the era. These are ethnic tensions, and the Sacco-Vanzetti trial is a good example of that. Okay, I said the return of the KKK. Let's be more specific. Why did the KKK come back? Well, there's many reasons, but one is they found a new group to force their hatred towards, and those are the new immigrants. Okay, before they're solely focused on African Americans. That changes. It's still African Americans, but now it is Italians. Now it is Eastern Europeans. Now it is Jews. Now it is Catholics. All right, so they expand their hatred because of new immigration. Okay, they're going to reach a peak in 1924 of 4 million members of the Ku Klux Klan. They have a rally in the 1920s right here in D.C. It's kind of a jarring picture to see the Capitol in the background with the Ku Klux Klan marching. Their popularity will go down after the 20s, but they reach their peak during the 20s. Okay, this is out of order from your notes. I get it. Just listen. Palmer raids. After World War I, there is a scare about communism. With the Bolshevik Revolution, Russia has become communist. Now, the color associated with communism is red. So this is known as the Red Scare. In 1917, Attorney General Mitchell Palmer leads the Palmer raids and arrests 6,000 suspected communists. 500 were not United States citizens, and they were deported. The idea was to find all these guns because it was assumed they were going to start a revolution. In reality, they only found 3 guns. What the Palmer raids also shows, like Sacco-Vanzetti, like the Ku Klux Klan, is there's an ethnic tension going on. Obviously, these suspected communists, while we're being criticized for their political views, also were mostly Eastern European immigrants to the United States as well. So you can put the Palmer raids in that category as well. All right, switch it up real quick. Here's another clash of cultures. Women in the 1920s. They got an amendment. We learned about that last time. The 19th Amendment gives women the right to vote. But there is a movement, not everywhere, but a movement especially in the big cities, called the Flappers movement. What is a flapper? Flapper is you ever heard of a 21st century woman? A flapper is a 1920s woman known for cutting their hair short. That was not the traditional way to wear your hair, especially at this time. Wearing clothes that were more revealing. That is a rejection of traditional values. Wearing more makeup. Going out in public to smoke, to drink, right? That type of picture of the city 1920s woman, the flapper, is a direct contrast to especially the more rural traditional women. So understand, they're voting, and we've got flappers, and that's different than before. All right. Scopes monkey trial. Let's go to Tennessee real quick, right? Scopes monkey trial is all about traditional religion, fundamentalist religion, versus evolution. The clash starts in Dayton, Tennessee. There's a biology teacher named John Scopes, and in Tennessee, you cannot teach the theory of evolution. You have to teach creationism. Scopes says, I'm going to teach evolution. He does. He gets arrested. There's a court case, right? He was put on trial for teaching evolution. He's ultimately found guilty. He's fined a relatively small amount. As a matter of fact, William Jennings Bryan, who was the prosecutor against Scope, he actually paid his fine for him. Okay? So the results of it aren't that important. It's not like anybody's getting sentenced to death here. The Scopes monkey trial is important because it shows that there's now a challenge against traditional religion from evolution. It's not like, oh, you hear Scopes monkey trial, man, that thing is done. Nobody's worried about evolution. Nobody's worried about fundamentalist religion, which one's right, which one's the view that America should accept. The Scopes monkey trial says the battle is on. The battle is on. There's going to be much tension about that clash, okay? All right, prohibition. Prohibition is the 18th Amendment, and the idea is you cannot make alcohol, because if you can't make it, then eventually they'll all get drunk up, and then there'll be no more alcohol left, right? It's part of the temperance movement, and it's obviously has the theory of it is good, right? Less people drinking, less people committing violence, committing crime, etc., and so forth. The problem was the American people didn't really accept prohibition very well. Many Americans either smuggled alcohol or I should say, consumed it in speakeasies, which were like secret bars of the time. Now, smuggling alcohol actually happens very much so in the South. During this time, many Southerners are making alcohol using corn whiskey, otherwise known as moonshine. They made really fast cars, which they would race from the revenue agents so that they didn't get caught. This was the advent of NASCAR. The sport of NASCAR comes out of the 18th Amendment. The 18th Amendment will get repealed, but understand, it was a great idea, but man, American people didn't really accept it. They just did not accept prohibition. Last theme, Harlem Renaissance. Okay, a Renaissance itself means a cultural explosion, a cultural celebration, and at this time, it is a cultural celebration of African American culture. It happens in a section of New York called Harlem. Now, it's many things. It is the arts. So the arts could be poems, the arts could be books, the arts could be music. Well, let's talk about our writers. Right here is Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes is an African-American writer who becomes the literary voice of the Harlem Renaissance. He writes I Too Sing America, which stresses African Americans to have pride in their culture and in their race. Louis Armstrong over here, you can see with the instrument he's holding, he's going to be our famous jazz musician. Jazz is the most popular music form of the 1920s, and he increases the popularity of it. So, Harlem Renaissance, we got, especially, let's remember Langston Hughes, the literary giant. Let's remember Louis Armstrong, the musical giant. Beautiful, great. Man, that was exciting. 1920s are fun. But it's all going to come crashing down.